Why is it that so many of us have come to accept that in a marriage or a long-term relationship, our sex life is naturally going to dwindle? Why are there always guys in the comments of every single video saying, my wife would never, she's not interested, she won't even touch me? You're out of your mind, Caitlin. Why is it that people come to me every single day saying that our relationship is great, but our sex life is complete dead on arrival? There are so many dynamics that it can occur between the members of a couple that rot the intimate connection between them over time. These sinister, sneaky little dynamics that could be ruining the whole thing. Often people come and they want to just take a pill or go to a retreat and have that be the thing that restores their sex life. They watch porn together or they do more foreplay, and all of this is potentially good, but if the problem in your sex life has nothing to do with sex, if it's because you're in a dynamic like the one that I'm about to talk about that is inherently unsexy, as long as you are locked in that dynamic, you can buy all of the scented candles and lingerie and retreats and whatever, you are not going to be able to have that fire between you because you're going to be stuck inside of a relationship that is inherently unsexual. And in this video, I am going to describe one of those dynamics. I'm going to tell you what you can do about it. Because when it comes to romantic relationships, most of us can agree on one thing. It's best to keep the drama out of it. And yet, for a lot of folks, drama keeps finding its way into our close connections. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, wait, Caitlin, but doesn't drama make for hot sex? Not in a healthy relationship, my friends. So if you are someone who feels like no matter what you do, you get into stupid fights, you make each other feel like crap, you end up with feelings of guilt or resentment in your relationship, and all of that is getting in the way of you having spicy, hot sex, then this video is for you. Because I'm gonna break down something called the drama triangle, and it might be the key to bringing more joy and less friction, unless that's the good kind of friction, into your relationship. And whether you're single or partnered, this is something you have got to understand if you want to have happy and successful relationships across the board, with friends, with colleagues, with your boss, with your children, with your brother, etc., etc., etc. First off, I've got to say that this is not about assigning blame, okay? Once you see yourself inside of this drama triangle or you see the other people in your life, I don't want you to go out there and try to figure out who is at fault, because turmoil in relationships happens to us. Intimate bonds are inherently scary and triggering. They are exposing experiences. It is easy to get caught up in the drama triangle. In fact, sometimes it feels like there is no way out of a toxic pattern like this. But lucky for you, there is, and it is a lot simpler than it might initially seem. So let's get straight to it. What is the drama triangle? Sometimes referred to as the victim, perpetrator, and savior triad, the drama triangle is a psychological framework that describes a very common dysfunctional relationship dynamic. These roles in all relationships tend to shift between partners depending on the situation. And in order to avoid it, we've got to understand what these roles are and which one you have the habit of falling into, because all of us have a favorite role in there. All right, let's break down the three roles. Number one, the victim. In relationships, it is easy for some of us to fall into a victim mentality. Sometimes we are genuinely a victim of another person's behavior, manipulation, abuse, neglect. That's not what this triangle is about, okay? But often, if we take a really good look at ourselves and our partners, we will see that there is actually a victim mindset that exists in the relationship rather than an objective actual abuse reality. The victim often feels helpless, like there's nothing that they can do to fix whatever problem is going on. That problem is happening to them. They're not contributing to the issue at hand, and if only the other person would change, the problems would just all go away. The person playing the victim role is often going to seek validation and reassurance from their partner to an unhealthy degree. They might feel like they don't have the power in their hands to change the dynamics of the relationship or the circumstance that is bringing them down. Role number two, the perpetrator. Often sometimes referred to as the villain, is the person who is seen as causing all of the conflict and doing all of the harm. This person is perceived as maybe critical or neglectful or controlling. If you've been cast in this role in your relationship, you might feel guilty or misunderstood. You may feel like you're trying, but you can never make your partner happy. You might feel like you take all of the blame in this relationship. All of the issues and guilt falls onto you no matter what the circumstances are. And you might legitimately feel like the villain. And the third and final role is the savior, the white knight. This is the person who is constantly stepping in to fix everything and to save the day for the victim. In relationships, this person often neglects their own needs in favor of solving their partner's problems. They take on more responsibility than is healthy, and they often end up feeling resentful, depleted, and they are doing all of the heavy lifting in the relationship. Over time, they tend to view their partner as less capable and more like the victim because they are always the ones doing all of the work. You can see that we have 3 roles here, but we're talking about a relationship that includes 2 people. That's why I was saying that they can change depending on the circumstance, depending on the time. You might find yourself going from victim to the villain, and your partner going from the villain to the savior in like one conflict. It can get very messy like that. And you can see how no matter which role you're in, this creates a pretty gross cocktail of yuck inside of romantic partnerships. Now, the thing about these roles is that no matter which one you fall into, you are letting your partner down. If you're the victim, you're contributing to the drama. You're the savior, you're still responsible for the imbalance that is causing that friction in your relationship because you are willing to step in and be the savior, which means the other person has to be cast as the victim. In relationships, these roles are fluid. They are shifting. In one aspect of your relationship, you may feel like you've always been made to be the bad guy. Maybe you go out with your friends. You enjoy spending time with the guys, and you're made to feel guilty about the situation. In this situation, you are the perpetrator and your partner is the victim. They are a victim of your choice to like leave them at home and spend time with your buds. On the other hand, you might feel like your partner is always being passive aggressive about the situation. So every time you have plans to go out, they sulk, but they don't really tell you why they're angry, but they do make you feel like shit for enjoying your relationships. And maybe they're like snarky and they're critical of the guys, or you're spending too much money out there and what a waste of your time and your life drinking beer or whatever. You, in that instance, might feel like the victim, and you might be seeing them as the perpetrator because they're the one that's making you feel bad and you don't have any control over the situation. Or what if you stop going out with your friends at all in order to make them happy and rescue your partner from their discomfort? Now you're the savior. Do you see how this thing gets complicated? And maybe what isn't being taken into account is that the issue isn't you going out with your friends at all. Maybe the issue is that neither of you are making enough quality time in your relationship, and instead of just naming that and saying it and asking for it, you've decided to take low blows at each other over this thing that is easier to see and easier to argue about. These dynamics show up differently in every relationship. And I'm sure if you just take a moment right now to reflect on your current relationship, or even better, maybe a past relationship, you can find a situation where you were playing one of these roles and where you willingly cast your partner in another role. The important thing to understand is that we are not any of these things. A victim is not just a victim. A perpetrator is not just a perpetrator. These roles literally coexist with each other. You cannot have one without the others. And that is why the key to breaking out of these dynamics is not to switch roles. It is to take yourself out of the roles completely in order to see it from a different perspective so that you can get to the bottom of what is really going on. So how do we break out of the worst triangle since the Bermuda Triangle? Was that funny? That wasn't funny. Here are 5 simple steps that you can take either on your own or with your partner to build a more healthy relationship. Number 1, recognize the roles. Awareness is literally almost always the first and most important step. So many people never put in the effort to actually take a real hard look at the situation and acknowledge how they themselves are contributing to it. And this is why so many people are in unhealthy relationships, unhappy marriages, sexless marriages, sex-starved relationships where like we can't even initiate sex with each other because the person jumps and they just reject us right away. So much of this has got to do with how we are contributing to this scenario. We can't be free of it until we actually take account for ourselves. Now, in order to break free of the triangle, eventually both partners need to identify when they slip into these roles and recognize how this dynamic is impacting the relationship. Number 2, once you've identified what is going on, the next step is to take responsibility for your part in the dynamic. And this is hard, especially if there are feelings of resentment, pain, and unhealed wounds regarding the situation. We've all heard the saying, it takes 2 to tango when it comes to romantic relationships, and this saying applies to pretty much any dynamic that you find yourself in. And if you want to solve the problem, then you need to take responsibility for your actions without blaming the other person. And just like the tango itself, this is kind of tricky and you might step on each other's toes sometimes. Now, if both of you come to the table with an honest and self-aware assessment of what you have done to get here, there's no need for blame. And suddenly you are able to have a constructive conversation and see a way forward without the drama, because we are not here to litigate and figure out who is at fault. We are here because we want to have have a healthy, sexy, happy relationship, and we want to clear out the things that are in the way. Which brings me to step number 3, which is to set some healthy boundaries, which of course every relationship needs to flourish. Take a look at the behavior that you've both taken responsibility for and figure out what you need to do differently to make a change. Remember that boundaries are the distance from which I can love both me and you both. So for example, if you find yourself in the savior role, how can you stop overextending yourself to quote unquote fix your partner's problem? How can you allow your partner to show up and do some of the heavy lifting? How can you support them on the side by believing in them? If you're the victim, what can you do to take ownership over your emotional state? How can you reach a place where you feel like you have power and agency within your relationship and you have a semblance of control over how you are feeling? And if you are the perpetrator, how can you acknowledge any hurt that you have caused while also acknowledging and being clear on what your needs are in the relationship? I think that being very clear and acknowledging where we have caused harm when it is safe to do so is one of the most liberating things we get to do in a relationship, because we get to take off the pain of being cast as the perpetrator by saying, yeah, I did cause harm. Here's the impact of it. I get that. I'm sorry. And here's what I'm going to do differently. There are really good resources on how to craft a really good apology. You can check those out after this video. Getting really clear about the actionable steps. You must talk to each other about your needs and your expectations. You've got to do the work of communicating so that you can get on the same page about how you're going to meet each other, which brings us to number 4, shift to empowerment. Regardless of what role you find yourself in, a shift to a feeling of being empowered, both personally and as a team, is critical to making a change. So make a commitment to communicating your needs to each other on a regular basis and keeping a sense of accountability towards each other when you slip. A key element in finding a sense of empowerment is remembering that relationships are tricky, but you have made the active decision to be in one, and I guarantee that you are capable, no matter what you're coming from, how you're raised, what you've experienced. You are capable of having a beautiful, supportive, and caring dynamic. It is the fertile soil for a healthy sex life. Because if you have been stuck in the perpetrator, victim, savior triangle, where is the sex in there? There's nothing sexy in there. Victims can't fully consent to or ask for what they want when it comes to a sexual dynamic. The perpetrator is going to be accused of things. They're going to be hurting feelings and causing harm in the sexual dynamic. The savior might back out of the sexual dynamic altogether because it's too complicated or it feels too messy or they just don't want to bother them anymore. There's no sex in there. That is a sexless triangle if I have ever seen one. And to be fair, triangles are kind of inherently sexy, I think, personally. Thinking of construction and building braces. I don't know, triangles, you could say triangles are inherently unsexy. I'm a nerd, so I'm going to go with that they are sexy. But this triangle, the drama triangle, not sexy. Worst of all the triangles. If you saw yourself and your partner or a previous partner inside of this video, do not panic. Like I said, in addition to those steps, there are plenty of professionals, both coaches and therapists, who are able to help you to sort this out and make the changes that you need to in order to have a great, healthy relationship and sexy sex life. Which brings me to number 5. Create a collaborative partnership. Instead of just passively falling into these roles, you have got to remind yourself and each other that you are both playing on the same team. You are collaborators in building a relationship. You are not blaming each other. You are not on opposite sides of the table. You are not on opposite teams. You are tackling the same issue from the same team. You are working together to stop a pattern that you've both fallen into. You're not working against each other. So no matter where you're at, with enough effort and self-awareness and maybe some professional support, you can replace a toxic pattern with a pattern of communication, of mutual support, of emotional honesty, passion, polarity, and attraction between you. Because when you recognize and break free from the drama triangle, you are able to have the healthy, respectful, sexually satisfying relationship that you deserve. Remember, you deserve better, and better is available. I'd love to see below in the comments where you have fallen into this triangle before and anything that you want to share about how you broke out of it. And while you are there, please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel, where I post every single week videos designed to help you have the best sex and relationship of your life. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you here next week. Bye.